So with that, why don't we move to quick introductions. I'm David Ross. I'm the Senior Associate Director in Career Services. I am joined today by my colleague Jingy Yen, who is the Associate Director in Career Services and who will be presenting a little bit later on in our session, and our wonderful colleague Ashley Culver, who will be monitoring our chat today. So as I alluded to a moment ago, Ashley Culver will be the person you can send private messages to during the session, and we will make sure to answer those questions before the event is over. So we want to start very quickly with an overview of what we're going to cover today. So first, we're going to start very quickly on the topic of career exploration. It's something that has been asked by a lot of second-year students, so we want to address that very quickly. Then we'll tell you a little bit more about the ways sophomores have spent their summer, experiences they've had in previous years. We'll talk a little bit about industry hiring timelines and why those are important to consider. Then we will definitely spend some time on internship search strategies and networking. So that's going to be later in the session, but we definitely want to prioritize and make sure you leave with some good tips on how to proceed with your searches. And then finally, just reviewing some career services resources that are available to you and you might want to leverage and consider taking advantage of at this point. So we wanted to kick off the presentation today because we know some sophomores are thinking about this upcoming summer 2021, and some sophomores might actually be thinking about summer 2022. So before we move forward with the presentation, we just wanted to address, for those considering summer 2021 options, there are definitely positions still available. There are new listings added daily in our systems and other channels, and some opportunities have not even been posted yet, as hard as that might be to believe. In addition, there are definitely opportunities to connect with employers that are coming up over the next couple of months, and we'll talk more about those later on in the presentation. We also know, again, that there are individuals thinking about summer 2022, and early recruiting has begun for opportunities in financial services in particular. Timelines will vary a little bit by company, and some employers opt to use a rolling process opposed to an application deadline date. Keep in mind that many opportunities for summer 2022 will begin recruiting in the fall and certainly into the spring semester. So it's still really, really early to start searching and applying for listings from that perspective. Part of the reason why we wanted to talk about this today is our presentation is designed to assist those that are considering opportunities for summer 2021 as well as summer 2022. So please feel free to take notes and utilize the information, whether you're looking for opportunities this summer or for the following summer. So as mentioned, we want to start with career exploration because that's a popular question that has come up. And as you think about your strategies and tactics you're going to use, we would encourage you to incorporate the idea of career exploration as a sophomore, really taking the time to consider and explore your options as opposed to simply applying and finding that opportunity. We want to make sure you're taking the time to evaluate employers and opportunities available through conversations, interviews, and events. So yes, that's definitely a part of the application and ultimate process of getting offers, but use that time to evaluate and explore and try to identify if those opportunities are the right fit for you. Also, don't narrow your focus too soon. So consider the fact that as a sophomore student, you have a couple of additional years to explore opportunities as well. So this could be a great year to try something out and don't feel like you have to opt into a track too soon. And more importantly, we think that this is a theme that you should take with you throughout your years beyond Penn as well. There's no blueprint or best approach to career exploration. Sometimes we're asked, how should I approach this? What should I do my fall semester, my spring semester? It's more fluid and dynamic. So you'll find opportunities to explore both for the spring into the summer and in years ahead as well. But we encourage you to reflect on your experiences both inside of the classroom and outside, as well as your experiences over the summers to determine what's the best fit for you. And your interests may change over time, and that's okay. One of the resources we wanted to start with today is career communities. And this is a rather new section to our website we added within the past year or two. We'll talk a little bit more about how you can leverage these from the perspective of searching and identifying opportunities for your sophomore year or maybe even junior year. But from the standpoint of exploration, this can be a great place to look at blog posts, videos, featured articles, and other things tailored to either industries you're interested in or identities that you might have. So definitely take some time to explore our career communities, and this might be a good idea to help generate prospects on future pursuits for you. In addition to that, we have a resource called Career Explorer. So it's basically a 15 to 30-minute assessment that will allow you to answer some questions on your skills, values, and interests, and then explore a database of over 800 opportunities that are out there. It'll generate 2 reports for you, one specifically with a list of recommended occupations to consider, and the second a little bit more about personality and fit within the workplace. So definitely take some time to check out Career Explorer if you haven't already, and we're happy to discuss the results of those 2 reports with you and how to leverage them to identify opportunities that are the right fit. The next thing we wanted to cover today was a little bit about sophomore summer experiences to give you a sense of what sophomores have done. We know that's a popular question, what's realistic, what's open to sophomores, and some data points that we think might be helpful as you think about your search. So before we move to some data, I wanted to ask a quick question. The question is, how did most sophomores find their summer opportunity? Do you think that was A, through on-campus interviews, B, through career fairs, C, through contacts, or D, through handshake? So if you can take a moment and put your vote in the chat, we're curious to see what you think about the way that's most common for sophomores to find their summer opportunities. We'll give people a couple of moments to chime in. All right, so the answer to this question is C, contact. So based on our data from 2019, 21% of students reported receiving offers their sophomore year through non-pin contacts. And that, I think, is surprising to students. I think they typically would assume handshake or on-campus interviews, but it really is through contact. So that's a good segue to our next slide. The 2 popular questions we have about sophomore summer: how did people hear about opportunities? What type of experiences did people have? So you'll see at the bottom of this slide a link where you can find a more detailed report. They're available by school, and you can see the information for rising juniors. But we wanted to talk very quickly about how people found opportunities in industries. So my takeaway from the data on the left side of this slide, there's no one right way or wrong way to do it. It's really going to be a little bit of trying a variety of these methods, and we'll talk more about some of them later on today. But making contacts and applying directly, as challenging as that might seem, actually does work. So you'll see here, and this is based on data across all Penn schools, so it's not one school specific. And with over 700 responses, that's a pretty good sample size. The other question is, well, what do people do? What types of roles do they pursue? So here, you'll see it's great variety. And it could be anything from tech to real estate marketing. Don't get caught up in the percentages per se, but I would say think a little bit more about the variety of things that people have done to give you insight in terms of options that are realistic and available for you as a sophomore student. Next question. What is the most common month sophomores find their summer opportunity? So again, if you can post your vote in the chat, is it A, February, B, March, C, April, or D, May? All right, I see some of the votes are coming in. And the answer to this question is actually a little bit of a trick question. It's B and C. So technically it's March and April. In 2019, 21% of students received offers in March and 21% of students received them in April. But we want to show you the bigger picture as well. If you look at this next slide here, you'll see that 64% of sophomores, and again, this is data across all Penn schools, all Penn undergraduate schools, 64% of sophomores receive their summer offer March or later. We want to mention that because we know that there's this sentiment that it's too late or I've missed a lot, I won't find anything. But just look at our data. A lot of our students are finding opportunities starting next month and beyond. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, plenty more opportunities available, more to come, and hopefully you can pursue those things that are of great interest to you. Next topic is industry hiring timelines. So one thing that we typically will hear is that a friend of mine has found an internship, and I'm just wondering, again, is it too late? What am I doing wrong? What am I missing? And in some cases, the reason why that is based on their industries of interest. So this slide is really a depiction of recruiting by industry, and again, highlighting when students accepted their offers. And so there are two takeaways that I wanted to point out for consideration both this year and just looking ahead to future years. Number one, there's variance by industry. So you'll see here, some industries typically just don't hire as early as others. So it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong or you're missing anything. It's just depending upon your interest, those opportunities might be available later. And point number two, for all of these industries, there's still opportunities available in March, April, May, and later. So don't feel like you've missed everything or missed most opportunities, but there is variance by industry, and we just wanted to show you examples of some of the industries we've been asked about more commonly. And you'll see in our report, we have industry-based reports, more details on more industries, so you can get a better sense of the recruiting timeline for other industries as well. But here are a couple of takeaways. Definitely take a look at those industry reports on the Career Services website to get more information based on your particular industry or industries of interest. As I just mentioned, the timeline can be different from peer to peer, so try not to get caught up in what other people are doing and what's happening for them. Focus on your individual search process. And then finally, there's also this consideration of class year in conjunction with hiring timeline. So what by industry, what do I mean by that? So for example, we've established that sophomore students will find opportunities typically in the spring and late spring. But if you look at it from an industry perspective, that timeline might be a little bit different for juniors. So for students considering opportunities in certain industries, if you have friends and peers that are juniors or seniors, their timeline might be a little bit earlier in that same industry than it would be for you as a sophomore student. So also try to calibrate and balance for the fact that there's some variance based on class year and industry combined, as opposed to simply industry. So let's shift to more of what I think brought a lot of people into today's session, specific strategies and ways you can identify opportunities. So we're going to highlight about 4 or 5 different recommendations for you and try to give you more details on different things you can try or ways to maybe improve the things that you've been working on up to this point. But before we jump into that, a little bit of context. We realize that searching for summer opportunities as a sophomore can be both challenging and exciting. And part of that is some opportunities are not explicitly stating that they're recruiting sophomores, even if they would consider a sophomore. Why do I mention that? Because oftentimes people will search according to class year or keyword sophomore. And in some cases, some opportunities that are open to sophomores might not specify in their posting that they actually are open to sophomores. So don't restrict yourself in terms of the way that you search. Keep in mind that some employers might be more open-minded than they actually mention explicitly in their posting. Number 2, not all positions are listed far in advance. A lot of just-in-time hiring happens for second-year students. So again, we talked a little bit about that earlier, but just keep that in mind. And then number 3, we'll go over, again, specific strategies and ways to approach it, but the best approach for you is going to be different than the best approach for a friend. So there's not one singular best approach for everybody. Consider how you can leverage any or all of the following tactics and approaches in your individual searches, and certainly our office is here to help you through this process. So let's start with the most direct consideration, finding listings. So many of you might already be familiar with Handshake, so we won't spend a lot of time on that today, but things to consider. Positions are added daily to the system. That's something that people might not assume. They might assume that the bulk of things have already been posted, but they are actually updated daily. So definitely check them frequently. And the second part is, as I just mentioned, things are not posted far in advance. So that's part of the reason why we see second-year students finding opportunities later in the semester is because they're posted later relative to other things. Other sites we would recommend, LinkedIn Jobs. So even though it's called LinkedIn Jobs, it does include internships. And the great thing about that is certainly you can use that platform to leverage your LinkedIn profile you might have created to apply and make that process easier. One that you might not be as familiar with is called Career Shift. So Career Shift is a relatively new resource we've added. It does include a job board that you can use to search for job and internship listings. And the best way to do that is when you log into the system, just simply click on Advanced Search. and use the keyword option to find internships. And then there's also a filter option as well. So if you haven't used Career Shift, it's a really great tool. It's very versatile. We'll talk a little bit more about it later on in another context as well. Indeed.com, if you're looking to search very broadly, can be really, really helpful to find things very efficiently as well. It does include links to internship and summer experiences. Sort of a Google search is basically what Indeed will do for internships. But we would encourage you to do your due diligence, because not all postings that pop up through that site have been vetted. And so you just want to make sure that you're comfortable with what you're seeing there. And then I mentioned career communities earlier from a career exploration standpoint, but I also want to consider that as a consideration for finding opportunities that are tailored to your interests, either by industry or by affinity groups. So we do have featured employers and jobs in each of those career communities that are more targeted, and some employers opt to promote their opportunities that way, as well as specific sites or other resources, either by industry or based on identity, that might be more helpful to you as well. So these are the best ways that you can approach finding listings and opportunities of things that are available. Try them out, see what works best for you. Second thing will be recruiting events. So even though we're getting towards the middle of the semester, there still are a couple of events through our office available that we want to make sure you're aware of. Number one, our Science, Data, and Tech Virtual Career Fair. So that will be on March 19th from 12 to 5 via Handshake. And then the other one, which we haven't done as much promoting for yet, is our All Ivy Plus Just-in-Time Fair, a new event that we're offering this year in conjunction with our peers at Ivy Plus schools across the country. That will be on April 7th from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. through a platform called Talent Space. We will email more about that and add more information to our site in the upcoming weeks. But those are definitely opportunities to connect with employers that are looking to hire summer interns. So don't overlook recruiting events either through our office or elsewhere that you hear about in the next couple of months as a way to find opportunities. Number three, a more proactive approach, outreach and inquiries. So another way to consider finding opportunity for the summer is consider contacting companies and organizations that you have an interest in, and just simply asking about opportunities that might be available if you don't see anything on their website that are currently posted or listed. And we would say this approach works best for smaller companies in certain industries. So it's not necessarily something that will work as well for larger companies, big brand names, but it's definitely a good way to identify other organizations that could be a good fit. To illustrate that a little bit, for example, if you have an interest in startups, particularly earlier stage startups, do not typically post, and they can be harder to find and identify opportunities. So reaching out to them and making a pitch is actually a really good approach in that regard. And also in financial services, some of the smaller firms are more open to students reaching out, and in some cases, they might be willing to take people aboard for the summer. So here's how I would recommend taking those steps to make this happen. Number one, make a list of companies of interest. How do I do that for places I'm not aware even exist? Use Career Shift's company search feature and advanced search, and that will help you generate a list of additional companies you might want to reach out to. Number two, identify an appropriate contact person at the organization. This will typically be a recruiter or HR professional. And again, Career Shift can be helpful to find contact information for that person, or LinkedIn might be helpful to find that person's contact information as well. Number three, send a brief email introducing yourself as a student and inquiring about opportunities. How might you structure that email? 3 to 5 sentences is really all you need. And in that email, mention your school degree program, areas of interest that align with the firm, any previous experiences you think are noteworthy, but keep it brief. And then simply express your interest and enthusiasm in the organization and ask if there are any opportunities that are currently available or will open up soon. Finally, I know sometimes people wonder, should I attach a resume, should I not? But if you do decide to attach a resume, simply acknowledge why you're doing it and mention that in your email. Some companies have policies against opening unsolicited attachments, so just be mindful of that. And then the next thing is pertaining to applying directly. So again, people think this doesn't work, things go into a black hole, but as you saw from our data earlier, it has worked for students. But we want to talk about it today because there are ways that you can enhance your chances if this is the only option for certain opportunities. Number one, don't wait until the application deadline to submit your application. Apply as soon as possible. even if there's a deadline in the posting, some employers might pull that posting if they get a lot of applicants early. So in some cases, people might miss out because of that. So to avoid that situation, please submit your application early. Doesn't necessarily have to be the first day it's open, but don't necessarily wait until the deadline either. Tailor that resume to the position. We know people have a variety of interests, and some experiences might be more relevant for some positions than others. So if you can tailor your documents, that will increase the chances of being selected for interviews. Submit a cover letter if you have the option to do it. We know some employers might not accept them, some might make it optional, but if you have a chance to make a case for why you're a good fit, I would definitely recommend doing it. If you do submit a cover letter, make sure it's not longer than a page and customize it again for the position and company. A really cool tech way to enhance your chances is to leverage a system called Targeted Resume, which you can see the link here to access on the Career Services website. Some employers use what are called applicant tracking systems, and this is basically automated ways to scan resumes before somebody takes a closer look at a smaller pool. So we know that keywords and certain experiences might help a resume stand out. So you can use Targeted Resume for free to compare a job posting and your resume to see how well they both match up before submitting it for the actual position. So definitely take a look at Targeted Resume, get some more specific advice on your resume as it relates to a position and ways you can optimize it to increase the likelihood of being selected for the interview. And then the final piece of advice is following up if you haven't heard back specifically. Sometimes people assume, well, they will contact me if they're interested in me. And yes, that's true to some degree. But in some cases, following up and showing how much you are interested can be influential to move the needle and encourage people to give you more consideration. And this is certainly helpful if you don't hear back in a timely manner, or if you don't have a sense of when applications will be reviewed for the position. So those are some best practices for applying directly. Now I will turn it over to my colleague Jingy to talk more about networking to leverage existing networks and build new connections.
Great. Thank you so much, David, for throwing it to me. We already had a question earlier about making the connection, so I'm excited to kind of talk through how this would look. So networking tends to be an important part of the process, but it's not the only part of the process. Really, when we think about networking, the goal is to have conversations, to get to know somebody new. It's not necessarily the goal to get a job or internship out of it. It's just part of the process. One thing to consider is trying to be authentic and don't try too hard to impress. And I think when we think about networking, if we go into the conversation with the goal of just getting to know somebody and having an opportunity to go through interest, then it's easier for us to be more authentic and genuine in that conversation. Situational awareness is also important. So being able to read the room, to see if the other person is interested in what you're talking about or wants to talk more about your experiences. And one thing to remember also is not all contacts will respond. Sometimes you'll reach out to a lot of people and the response rate can be low. That is normal. That doesn't mean necessarily that your approach is wrong. Try not to take it personally. You don't need quantity. You don't need a lot of people to talk to. You really just need that one person who oftentimes can be that one advocate for you on the inside. The other thing to remember is that some conversations will go better than others. I think when I think about networking, I think about it a lot as like making friends. Sometimes you will just have better conversations with people. Sometimes you'll just get along better with certain people over others. So networking is the same way. Don't get discouraged if you do have a conversation that doesn't go as well as other ones. And the other thing to remember is that it is a skill that improves with practice over time. It is something that you can get good at, and with practice, you continue to get better. Next slide. Great. So when we think about networking, there's two different types of contacts, right? It's either the contacts that you already may have within your network, and then also building new connections outside of that. Starting with the first, leveraging existing contacts, think about the existing networks that you have and who could fall within one of these buckets. So for example, people that you meet within student groups, your peers, friends, upperclassmen, mentors, both formal and informal, as well as your family and extended family as well. There could be connections to be made within any of these buckets. One thing that could be useful is to make a list of people that you know across these categories. Start thinking about, am I interested in learning a little bit more about them and their background and what they're involved in? not a bad idea to contact them and let them know about your interests, and also let them know tell them that you will be open to being contacted if they discover any opportunities that would be interesting to you, or any referrals or introductions to even other people. One thing that's always important when you are reaching out is, or when you're having these conversations, is to ask, who else do you think I should talk to? And that's how you can continue to build your network from, a friend to a friend of a friend. This is really important because some internships actually become available through the hidden job market. So something that we talk about a lot. Maybe it's not opportunities that are formally posted on Handshake or, Indeed or any of these websites we talked about, but they are opportunities that may become open to you through the networking piece. Great. Okay. So then that was a little bit about leveraging the connections you already have. What about making new connections? Or, for a lot of people or a lot of students, we get the question of like, okay, there's nobody in my network that I feel comfortable reaching out to, or that are doing the things that I'm interested in. So reaching out to new connections can also be definitely an option. So we've listed a couple of resources to find new connections. Career Shift, we talked a little bit about already in terms of finding opportunities. It's also a really great system for finding contacts. You can search by company, you can search by a specific person. I use this a lot when I'm trying to find recruiter contact information, or maybe you met with someone at the career fair and you forgot to get their contact information. Career Shift is a really good resource, for finding hiring managers, recruiters, things like that. MyPen is also a really good resource for finding alumni. This used to be, we used to have a system called QuakerNet. So you guys may be familiar from your experience using QuakerNet last year. It's now called MyPen, very similar system. It's our internal alumni database, available for alumni from all Penn schools. And you also have access to MyPen as a current student. So you don't need to be an alumni in order to have access. Anytime you're reaching out to an alum, I think great idea to use MyPen to start there first, because they tend to have their personal contact information in there. In the event that they don't have their contact information in there, or they don't have a profile in MyPen, then LinkedIn is also a really great resource, because you can search specifically by alumni, as well as by industry, by company, all of that. So sometimes these conversations with new connections can lead to internship leads or opportunities as well. But again, like, I wouldn't make that the main focus of your conversation. When contacting alumni, you may not ask directly for an internship. Instead, you may start off that conversation more broadly, asking for their advice, how they enter the field, learning a little bit more about how they were able to get to where they are. And we'll go into a little bit more detail later about maybe how to craft that message and what to include in there. Once in a while, this conversation does lead to a referral or tapping into that hidden job market like we talked about. And so that's why I think the networking piece becomes really important, but it's not the only way to sort of get there. Alumni tend to be really receptive to inquiries from current students, especially if you frame it like, I want to learn more about you and your experience. The reason is they remember what it's like, to be in your shoes as a sophomore going through this process. So they're very willing to kind of get back and help. As you're looking at alumni profiles or just connections that you are, searching on Career Shift or LinkedIn or MyPen, not a bad idea to consider all the things that you may have in common. So over here, we've just listed a couple of things to consider, whether it's, you guys went to the same high school, maybe you know somebody in common, so you're connected to somebody who's connected to them. And LinkedIn calls that second degree connections. Perhaps you studied the same subjects at Penn, played some similar sports, or had similar interests and hobbies. Those are all really great things to identify as you are searching through the profiles of people that you want to make connections with, because using those things in that first email contact is really helpful to get them to want to respond back. Great. So along the same lines, making sure that you do the hard work first. So it's really important to do some research on the contact, their industry, what their roles were prior to the ones that they're currently doing, what were some of the things they were involved in undergrad. All of those things will help make a really tailored message as you're contacting people, so it doesn't feel like, okay, this is the same message that's going out to everybody. Okay, so this is a great slide. We have a sample email over here, and we've also written do not send. And you'll see why maybe we have encouraged you not to send something like this. I'll just read it to you so that everyone can hear it. So as a sample email, it would be great to hear your thoughts on how I can secure a position in this industry to get a satisfying and lucrative job. I'm particularly interested in learning about some of the trends I should know about, what impact they will have, and how to effectively navigate the application and hiring process. Have you been to the new office in Boston? Is it nice? I'm also trying to find out about the new division there. Thanks. So the reason why we recommend that you don't send an email like this is because it tends to be really, or it feels very focused on you or the writer of this email and less about the person that they're reaching out to. So what you want to avoid is having an email that's really, only about you and what you want to learn and what you want to get out of the conversation. And you also want to avoid having an email that's kind of broad like this, where it doesn't feel super tailored one way or another. And we'll go into more detail about how to make it a little more tailored too. So as you're crafting your message, some things to remember. The subject line should be clear, attention getting, but not really gimmicky. Something clear to the point that tells the reader exactly what you're looking for. So for example, something like informational interview request from current Penn sophomore. Great, that's to the point, that tells them exactly what you're looking for. Within the content of your email, making sure that you explain why you are writing, how you're connected to them. So maybe, again, somebody common, or you had the same concentrations going, in undergrad or whatever. Why are you contacting this particular individual? So that goes back to the tailoring aspect of it. What you're hoping to accomplish and why this would be helpful for you. So some sort of actionable step at the end that tells them about what you're looking for. And then what the next step, and of course, thanking them for their consideration. So I mentioned in the previous slide an actionable step. So what is your ask? What are you really asking from them? A possibility could be, would you be open to answering a few questions about your role, virtually or over the phone? Or do you have 20 minutes to talk about your work as whatever in this industry? Making sure that you include some sort of ask in that email, that first initial email, is really important, so that there is something that they can respond to. So they know, okay, this person wants to chat with me for 20 minutes or whatever, the next couple of weeks. And it makes it easy for them to take that next step. Great. So in terms of outreach emails, there are things that you want to avoid that fall into either the too long email or even the too short email. So there's always a happy medium in there. Sometimes the email can be too long if it's really rambling, you're putting in a ton of information that maybe you should be saving for the actual conversation. It could be too specific on the writer's background. So like the sample email that, I wouldn't encourage you to use. For example, on that one, it was too much about the person, what they wanted. Maybe it's requesting too much information. So instead of just having 1 or 2 questions, you're including like 10 different things you want to know about. Or you're requesting information that's easy to find online, so that goes back to making sure you do your research ahead of time. Perhaps it's not customized to the reader, so you're sending out like a form template email to everyone, or it doesn't value the reader's unique perspective. It could also be too short. Maybe it's short and simple and to the point, but it's not specific to the person or the industry you're asking about. Perhaps it's requesting information that's too broad. It doesn't identify clear next steps or actionable things. It's not customized to the reader. As you can see, that could be both in the too long or too short email. Making sure that you customize it is really important. And same thing, it does not value the reader's unique perspective. So some tips as you are crafting your emails. One thing I like to do is making sure that you write the body of your email first, and then you can put in the subject line after. I know that seems like a little thing, but that really helps when you're crafting your subject line to make sure that you are saying something that's really relevant to whatever you're asking in the body of the email. Establish what is your goal in writing your message. What's that actionable step? Are you requesting an informational interview? Do you have specific questions that you want to get answered? And then consider also when you are sending that email. Avoid sending it super late at night. I know all of you guys are up late. I get emails from you, in the middle of the night. So you want to avoid doing that, or over the weekend, because sometimes that tends to get lost, in their inbox. You can always set a time on that email to, have it sent later, but you can write it ahead of time and draft it ahead of time. And then of course, don't forget to thank your contact in advance for their time. All right, so all of that stuff was to get you to the actual conversation, right? Like we've sent emails out, now we have connected with someone, they're willing to talk to us. So now we're at the actual conversation. How are we supposed to handle this? So a couple of things before the actual conversation, making sure that you prepare a list of questions or discussion topics, and be ready to possibly lead that conversation. You are the one who reached out, so it's important for you to have some things, some questions to talk about, to lead it in case that the person is expecting that you're going to be asking most of the questions. But also be ready to have a pitch or an introduction in case you do get questions from them and they want to know a little bit more about you and your interests and why you've decided to reach out. During the conversation, make sure that you're attentive, listen carefully, asking appropriate questions. Make it a back and forth conversation. It's not just rapid fire, you're asking questions, but try as much as you can to make it conversational and build that rapport. Of course, demonstrate your interest in the industry or the company, whatever it may be. Your goal here is to make sure that you gain information and make a positive impression. And then definitely ask for advice. You can, especially in your current time here, you can say, okay, well, what can I do as a sophomore that would make me a really good candidate, coming into junior year or something like that, if you're looking for those kinds of opportunities. Don't ask for an internship directly. But know that if you do make a good impression, there are lots of internal incentives for employees of companies to refer you. So they will, they're not going to be shy about it. But it takes you making sure that you are building that relationship and making that positive impression. And then after the conversation, send a really brief but personalized thank you note within 24 hours or a day or two, within a time that they're going to remember that they had that conversation. And then remember that some networking conversations may result in helpful advice or internship leads, right? So making sure that you continue to follow up, even if there isn't an internship available right now, it could come in the future. And that segues really well into this next slide about following up. So I get this question a lot, like, now that we've had this great conversation with an alum or somebody, what do I do? What do I do with this contact person? How do I follow up? What are some ways to continue to build that relationship? So one thing that you could consider doing is keeping your contacts updated at the start of some sort of transition period, whether it's a semester or a season or before you start a summer internship. So you can reach back out at that time of transition and say, hey, thanks so much for speaking to me a couple months ago. I really learned a lot about X and X thing. Just wanted to update you on how my semester went or how my internship is going. That's a good idea because there is something to actually update them on. You can also send quick email greetings for holidays like New Year's, Thanksgiving, all of that. And then also remember to follow up as appropriate. You don't force it. You don't have to set like every 3-month reminder, I'm going to follow up with this person. When there are natural points in your life where you feel like you want to update them, great. And then definitely ahead of any applications to their organization, not a bad idea to reach out and say, hey, thanks so much for speaking to me. Just wanted to let you know I'm planning to apply for this internship, or I've already applied to this internship. That's another natural way to follow up with them. And then for more information on networking, I know we kind of did like a brief introduction to everything you would need to know. We do have an online course that you can view on our on Canvas. So the link is included here if you wanted to get a little bit more in depth. Great. So I crash course on networking, but this is not the one time that you have to connect with us. So I wanted to highlight some resources that are available to you as a follow-up to this conversation we're having. Some of our popular services and resources that I hope all of you are taking advantage of. The first being career advising appointments. So you can schedule 30-minute appointments via handshake with a career advisor to talk through your networking strategy, your sophomore search, just getting your materials reviewed, even mock interviews. We also do resume and cover letter reviews via email. So you can always email that into us. And then we also have drop-in advising hours if you needed some help, that day. And they're available throughout the academic year, and signups are available in Handshake as well. We also have our peer career advisors who are available on a drop-in basis every day, 9 to 7. They're totally trained by by full-time advisors, and they provide services including resume cover letter reviews, helping with the career exploration piece, interviewing tips. And they also do a lot of workshops. So if you guys ever, if you're part of student groups, you can always reach out to the PCAs to come to your student group and do a workshop as well. But they're great, especially for if you wanted to meet with someone day of, or you have a deadline coming up and you really need your resume reviewed. Okay, great. So we've covered a lot of content today between me and David. So some final thoughts. I think the biggest thing to remember is that sophomores at Penn have been very successful in finding summer internship opportunities. And it spans the timeline spans the entire year. There's not really one time that sophomores are getting it. The important things to remember is to be flexible and open to new opportunities and experiences, and casting a wide net. But only apply for the opportunities that you are interested in. Don't feel like you have to apply to everything. One thing a tip that I like to give to a lot of students is trying to dedicate some time each week to this search. I wish it was something that you could cram for. I wish it was like in a day or two, you could just send out 1 million applications and you could just be done with the whole process. But unfortunately, the internship search isn't really like that. It really is much more like a class. And sometimes it is helpful to dedicate actual time, like a class, week by week, to work on some of these things. Some employers may not reply, like you may apply for opportunities or internships and they just won't reply to you. Again, don't take that personally. It's just part of the process, a very annoying part of the process, but just part of it. Searching for internships can take some time, like we mentioned. So it's important to manage your expectations in advance. You may submit a lot of applications and you may not get a ton of interviews. That's a normal part of the process. It doesn't mean that you're not a great candidate or that you're doing something wrong. It just is part of it, and it's a not super fun part of the process as well. So the main thing to remember from all of this is that we are here to help in that process. The process is very individual depending on what you're interested in and where you are in your time. So definitely feel free to connect with career services, with an advisor, and we're happy to walk you through your own individual strategies.